A 27-year-old poet and waitress in Asheville, North Carolina, disappeared on the afternoon of November 19, 1994, a Saturday, after writing a letter to her mother that morning, sealing it, stamping it, and leaving it on her kitchen table to mail on her way to work. Her name was Miriam Oates. Her mother never received the letter. Investigators found no trace of it when they searched the apartment. It was, as far as anyone could determine, simply gone. One more thing the investigation could not account for, among all the things it could not account for. But in March of 2023, an envelope arrived at the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office with a Weaverville, North Carolina postmark and no return address. Inside it was Miriam Oates' original letter, still in its cream envelope, still in her handwriting, still addressed to her mother, and a note explaining that the letter had been taken from her apartment before the police arrived, by the man who was responsible for her disappearance. 29 years late, it had finally come, and what Miriam had written in that letter's final paragraph, in the precise and specific language of a woman who made her living paying attention to the world, was everything the investigation had needed and never had. To understand why the letter mattered, and what it cost for it to arrive so late, and what it gave back when it finally did, you have to go back to Asheville in the autumn of 1994. Because to understand what was lost, you first have to understand who Miriam Oates was. Asheville in 1994 was a mountain town at a specific moment in its history. Still the working-class railroad and manufacturing community it had been for generations. Not yet the arts destination it would later become, but with something beginning to shift in its neighborhoods. Young people arriving for reasons the previous generation hadn't. Galleries opening on Lexington Avenue alongside the hardware stores and the laundromats. A particular energy in the coffee shops and the bars that was hard to name, but unmistakable. The Blue Ridge came down around the city on every side, and in November the mountains had already lost most of their color. The ridgelines brown and bare against the gray sky, and wood smoke came from the chimneys of the older neighborhoods, and the air at 5 p.m. tasted of winter coming fast. Miriam Oates had moved to Asheville from Hendersonville in 1990, 30 miles south, after 2 years at the local community college and a decision, clear to her if not always to the people around her, that she was a writer, and that Asheville was where she could be one. She waited tables at a restaurant on Marymount Avenue 4 nights a week, and spent the other days writing, accumulating the poems that she had been organizing into a first collection for 3 years. She had published 11 poems in small journals, had attended one residency in Vermont on a partial scholarship, and had a manuscript that she sent out twice a year to presses, that sent it back with letters that were, if not encouraging, at least specific. She was 27 years old, 5'4", with dark hair and the particular manner of someone who has trained herself to notice things, to stop in the middle of an ordinary moment and see it fully before it moved on. Her friends described her as the person who remembered the specific detail you had mentioned in passing 6 months ago, who sent handwritten notes to thank people for small kindnesses, who had a way of making you feel, when she was talking to you, that the conversation was the only thing happening in the world. She taught a Thursday evening writing workshop at the Buncombe County Public Library. Informal, no charge. Anyone who showed up was welcome. 6 people came regularly, sometimes 12. She had been running it since 1992 and had never once not prepared for it. Her mother, Frances Oates, lived in Hendersonville. They spoke by phone twice a week and wrote letters between calls, actual handwritten letters, a habit they had maintained since Miriam left for Asheville, because Miriam had insisted on it, and Frances had found, over time, that the letters said things the phone calls didn't. Miriam wrote on cream-colored stationery, with her initials monogrammed in the corner, MRO, that her Aunt Patricia had given her when she turned 21, a box of 50 sheets with matching envelopes that she had rationed carefully across 6 years. She was near the end of the box by November of 1994. She had written a letter on the morning of November 19, 1994, before her shift. She had sealed it and stamped it and set it on the kitchen table with her keys and her tip money from the previous night, intending to drop it at the corner mailbox on her way out. She did not make it to the mailbox. She did not make it to work. She did not make it to Thanksgiving, which was 3 days away, and for which she had told Francis she was planning to bring sweet potato pie, and for which Francis had already cleared the counter space. Miriam Oates was never seen again after the afternoon of November 19, 1994. Francis Oates called Miriam's apartment at 6:30 p.m. that Saturday, when Miriam had not called as expected. She called again at 8:00. She called Miriam's restaurant at 9:15 and was told Miriam had not come in for her shift. By 10:30, she had called 2 of Miriam's friends in Asheville. By midnight, she was in her car driving north on 26. The Buncombe County Sheriff's Office was notified at 7:20 a.m. on Sunday, November 20th, when Francis and one of Miriam's friends, a woman named Celia Park, went together to the apartment and found the door unlocked, Miriam's coat still on the hook, her keys gone from the table, and the table bare. No letter. Investigators processed the apartment on Sunday afternoon. They documented the bare table. They noted the absence of Miriam's keys and her small canvas bag that usually hung by the door. They found no letter. In the initial investigation log, the missing letter was noted as follows: subject reportedly left correspondence on kitchen table before departing. Item not located. Possibly taken by subject at departure or removed prior to police arrival. One line. No follow-up. The investigation was led by Detective Harold Yount of the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office. He was 51 years old, a competent, overworked detective in a department that was managing a significant caseload in the mid-1990s with limited resources. He ran the Oates investigation seriously for 4 months. He interviewed Miriam's colleagues, her workshop students, her friends, 2 former boyfriends. He identified no person of specific interest. He interviewed Curtis Pruitt, Miriam's landlord, who owned the Lexington Avenue building, on November 23rd, 4 days after her disappearance. Pruitt was cooperative, expressed concern, said Miriam had been a good tenant, said he had not seen her on Saturday. His statement was logged. He was not flagged for follow-up. No one told Yount about the basement. Miriam had mentioned the basement to only one person before she disappeared, to Celia Park, on the Thursday evening before she vanished, when she had said only that she had found something in the storage cabinet down there that she didn't understand and that was bothering her. She had not told Celia what it was. She had said she was going to figure it out over the weekend. Celia did not think to mention this to investigators in the first confused days after Miriam's disappearance, and by the time she remembered it and went to Yount with it, 6 weeks had passed, and Yount's attention had been partially redirected to 2 other active cases. He noted it. He did not interview Pruitt again. In January of 1995, Harold Yount requested a search warrant for Curtis Pruitt's business records. The warrant application was reviewed by the Buncombe County District Attorney's Office and denied on the grounds of insufficient probable cause. Yount appealed the denial. The appeal was not resolved before he transferred to a different division in March. The Oates case was reassigned. Curtis Pruitt continued to live in Asheville. He continued to run his renovation business. He continued to sit in the 3rd pew at First Baptist and to attend neighborhood association meetings and to be the man who knew everyone's name and remembered to ask about your mother's health. He was indistinguishable from exactly what he appeared to be. Frances Oates did not set the Thanksgiving table for 4 people in 1994. She set it for 5. An empty chair. A single candle. She did it again in 1995. She has done it every Thanksgiving since. The chair, the candle, the place that belonged to Miriam and that Frances was not willing to give to someone else or to nothing. 29 Thanksgivings. People who came to her table understood without being told. People who didn't learn not to ask. By 2000, 6 years after Miriam's disappearance, Celia Park had moved away from Asheville to Raleigh and then to Atlanta. She carried the guilt of the undisclosed basement conversation the way people carry things they cannot put down and cannot fully pick up. With the specific paralysis of someone who had said something too late and had not known until later that it was too late and who had no way to go back. She had told Yount what she remembered in December of 1994. That was all she could do. It was not enough. She knew it was not enough. By 2005, the Thursday evening writing workshop at the Buncombe County Public Library had been continued by one of Miriam's former students, a man named Theo Marsh, who had attended from 1992 to 1994, and who had decided. When Miriam disappeared, that continuing the workshop was the most direct thing he could do. He had been running it for 11 years by 2005. He changed nothing about the format. He ran it on Thursdays. He never charged anything. When people asked about the workshop's origins, he told them about Miriam. By 2010, Curtis Pruitt had retired from his renovation business and was in the early stages of a cardiac condition that would require surgery in 2014. He attended church. He was on the Neighborhood Association's Emeritus Board. His name had not appeared in any active investigation since 1994. By 2015, Harold Yount was 72 years old and had been retired for a decade. He still thought about the Oates case, in the way retired detectives think about the cases they did not close, not obsessively, but with a specific recurring weight, the way a bad tooth makes itself known in cold weather. He had kept his notes. He had kept the denial letter from the district attorney's office in 1995. He had kept the line about the basement. Curtis Pruitt died in October of 2019 of a cardiac event at 70 years old in the Asheville hospital where he had had his surgery 5 years before. He died as a man his community respected. His obituary mentioned his church, his neighborhood service, his renovation business. His wife Donna was listed as his survivor. Donna Pruitt had been his partner in the insurance fraud operation since 1989. She had known what he had done to Miriam since the evening of November 19, 1994. When he had come home and told her, and she had stood in their kitchen and understood, in the space of 1 minute, that her life had become a different shape than the one she had thought it was. She had stayed. She had said nothing. She had protected him the way people protect the life they have built when they cannot imagine any version of themselves outside of it. After he died, she found the letter. It was in a shoebox in the back of his closet, in a manila envelope with no label. She recognized the monogrammed initials on the cream envelope inside it, because she had read about Miriam Oates in 1994. And again in 2000 when the case was briefly reviewed, and again in 2010 when a local newspaper ran a retrospective. She opened the envelope. She read the letter. She read the final paragraph. She kept it for 3 more years. She was 74 years old in 2022, and her health was declining. She had stage 3 ovarian cancer. She was receiving treatment. She was also, in the specific way of people who know they are dying and have unfinished business, becoming unable to pretend that dying with a letter was an option she could choose. On March 11, 2023, she drove to the post office in Weaverville, not Asheville, where someone might recognize her, and mailed an envelope addressed to the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office. She died on April 29, 2023. She died without being charged with anything. She died having done the one thing she could still do. The case had been cold for 29 years when the letter arrived. Every story on this channel is built from weeks of careful research, verifying records, tracing sources, treating real lives with the honesty they deserve. If that matters to you, please take a moment to like and subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where in the world you're watching from. Now let's get back to Miriam. Detective Nora Castile of the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit had been assigned the Oates case in 2021. She was 41 years old. She had grown up in Asheville, had been 12 in November of 1994, and had a specific connection to the case she had never mentioned in her official capacity. Her mother had attended Miriam's Thursday writing workshop twice in the fall of 1993. And had come home on both evenings talking about the woman who ran it with the specific animation of someone who has been in the presence of a real teacher. She had read the original case file 3 times. She had noted the denied search warrant application from 1995, with the careful frustration of someone who understands exactly how that kind of institutional failure works. She had noted the line about the basement. She had noted that Celia Park's December 1994 statement about the basement conversation had never generated a second interview with Pruitt because Pruitt died in 2019 and was beyond that now. On the afternoon of March 14, 2023, a plain white envelope landed on her desk from the Evidence Intake Unit, flagged as potentially relevant to a cold case because of the handwritten note inside it. She opened the outer envelope. She read the note. This was taken from her apartment before the police came. Curtis Pruitt took. He is dead now. I have to send this. She set the note down. She lifted the cream envelope inside it with both hands, the way you lift something you understand to be fragile. And she looked at the monogram in the corner row, and at the address written in a hand she had never seen before, but that she recognized immediately as the handwriting of a woman she had been trying to understand for 2 years. She opened the envelope carefully and unfolded the letter. Miriam's handwriting. 3 pages. Dated November 19, 1994, the letter described the Saturday morning in Asheville, the light through the apartment windows, the smell of coffee, the sound of the street below. It described Frances and Thanksgiving and the sweet potato pie. It described the workshop from Thursday, 2 students in particular who had shown her something she hadn't expected. And then, in the final paragraph, it described what Miriam had found 2 weeks earlier in the basement storage cabinet, unlocked for the first time she had ever tried it, containing a box of documents and an envelope of photographs. Miriam did not know the specific language of insurance fraud. She knew what she had seen. She described it to her mother in the only language she had. The photographs looked like someone had arranged the damage to tell a story, the way you arrange flowers in a vase to make them look found rather than placed. Castile read that sentence twice. Then she put the letter down on her desk and was still for a moment. Then she called her supervisor. Then she pulled the denied 1995 warrant application and started drafting a new one. The subsequent investigation moved on 2 tracks. The first was a forensic examination of Donna Pruitt's estate. Donna had died 6 weeks after mailing the letter, and her estate was in probate, which yielded, in a storage unit in Weaverville, the original insurance fraud documentation that Miriam had described, the claim documents, the photographs, the records of 6 properties across Buncombe County that Curtis Pruitt had defrauded 3 insurance companies over 9 years. The documentation was intact. Pruitt had kept it the way he had kept the letter, which is to say he had not been able to destroy what he had done, only to hide it. The second track was the physical evidence review, which in 2023 had tools unavailable in 1994. Analysis of the outer envelope. The manila envelope that had contained Miriam's letter in Pruitt's closet yielded a DNA profile consistent with Curtis Pruitt and a secondary profile consistent with Donna Pruitt. The chain connecting the letter to Pruitt's hands was established in the record. The Buncombe County District Attorney's Office issued a formal finding in July of 2023, naming Curtis Pruitt as responsible for the disappearance and death of Miriam Oates, and naming his insurance fraud operation as the motive for which she was killed. The finding noted that Pruitt had died in 2019 and that Donna Pruitt had died in April of 2023, and that neither would face prosecution. The formal record was clear. The names were attached. The case was closed. Miriam's remains were not recovered. The fraud documentation provided the motive, and the letter provided the sequence, but the location of her remains was not established. The DA's finding noted this explicitly. That is the specific grief the case leaves permanently open. The family knows what happened and who did it, and does not know where she is. The Buncombe County Sheriff's Office noted the property records of every building Pruitt had owned or worked on, and has flagged them for future review. Castile called Frances Oates on the morning of July 9, 2023. Frances was 87 years old. She lived in the same house in Hendersonville, where she had been when Miriam called every Tuesday and Thursday for 4 years. Castile told her what had been found, what the formal finding established, and what remained unknown. Frances listened. When Castile finished, Frances asked one question. Was the letter found intact? Castile said yes. Frances asked if she could have it. Castile said she would make sure of it. On September 7, 2023, a Thursday, which Frances did not know was the day Miriam had run her writing workshop, but which Castile had been aware of when she scheduled the delivery, Nora Castile drove to Hendersonville herself and brought the letter to Frances Oates. Frances opened it at her kitchen table. She read it in full. When she reached the final paragraph, she read it twice, the way you read something when you need to be sure you have understood it. Then she folded the letter carefully and put it back in its cream envelope and held it in both hands for a while. She said that it sounded just like Miriam, that the letter sounded exactly the way Miriam sounded when she wrote to her, which was the way Miriam sounded when she was most herself. She said she had been waiting to hear Miriam's voice for 29 years. She said the line about the flowers in the vase was a very Miriam way of putting it. She said Miriam had always been able to see the arrangement of things. Miriam Oates wrote her mother a letter on the last morning she was fully herself. She described the November light coming through her apartment windows and the smell of coffee and the Thursday workshop and 2 students who had surprised her. She mentioned sweet potato pie. She saw, in a box of photographs in a basement cabinet, the arrangement of a crime, and she described it in her poet's language because that was how she saw. She sealed the letter and stamped it and left it on the table with her keys and walked out into a November Saturday in Asheville, which smelled of wood smoke and cold air and the mountains pressing in on every side. She was 27 years old. She had 11 published poems and a manuscript she had been building for, 3 years, and a Thursday workshop she ran for free for anyone who showed up, and a mother 30 miles south who saved her letters, and a table she was supposed to sit at in 3 days, and a counter cleared for a sweet potato pie. Curtis Pruitt took all of that. He took it because Miriam had seen what he was doing in a basement cabinet and had been poet enough to know exactly how to describe it, and he could not afford for that description to reach anyone who would act on it. He kept the letter because people who do what he did almost never fully destroy the evidence. They hide it. They seal it. They put it in a shoebox. They carry it forward year after year, and the weight of it becomes the shape of the rest of their lives. Donna Pruitt carried it differently. She carried it the way people carry a complicity they cannot leave and cannot justify, by staying, by saying nothing, by letting the years pass, by watching the empty chair at other people's Thanksgiving tables in newspaper photographs and understanding exactly what that empty chair cost. She sent the letter because she was dying, and because there is something in people, even people who have done what she did for as long as she did it, that requires a final accounting, a last delivery, a closing of the distance between what was hidden and what needs to be known. She did not deserve absolution. She delivered the letter anyway. What we do with that, whether it changes the weight of what she withheld, whether the final act modifies the 29 years before it, whether a letter that arrives decades late is better than one that never arrives at all, is a question this story does not resolve, and that real cases rarely do. Theo Marsh ran the Thursday writing workshop at the Buncombe County Public Library for 29 years after Miriam disappeared. He closed it in November of 2023, after the Dawes formal finding, because he felt it was complete. The last session was attended by 31 people. He told them about Miriam. He told them what the workshop had been before it was his. He told them he had tried to run it the way she would have run it, which meant no charge, no credential required, just the work. Frances Oates set the Thanksgiving table in November of 2023 with 4 place settings. She moved the candle to the center of the table. She did not remove the chair. She kept it where it had been for 29 Thanksgivings, because it was Miriam's chair, and because the letter had arrived and the case had been resolved, and the chair was still empty. And some things require more than a resolution to change. She said that getting the letter was not the same as getting Miriam back. She said she had known it wouldn't be. She said it was still the most important thing that had happened to her in 29 years, because it was the last thing Miriam had written, and it was addressed to her, and it had always been meant for her, and it had arrived. 29 years late. But it arrived. Miriam could see the arrangement of things. It was the quality that made her a poet, and that made her dangerous to a man who needed his arrangements unseen. Do you think Donna Pruitt's final act, mailing the letter as she was dying, changes anything about what she did for 29 years? Or does the weight of that silence remain fixed, regardless of how it ended? And for those of you who have followed cases where the victim's own words were the evidence that finally closed the case, what does it mean that Miriam's specific way of seeing the world is what named the man who killed her? Leave your thoughts below. We read every one. Justice, incomplete, as it almost always is, and 29 years late, found Miriam Oates. Stories like hers are why this channel exists. If you believe truth is worth pursuing no matter what form it arrives in, subscribe. More cases are waiting in the description, and every one of them belongs to someone who deserved better. Thank you for watching.